Let's start off with the topic gender and education attainment. As you see, this particular topic can be broadly put into four different categories. The first one over here is gender, socialization, and education attainment. The second one is social changes and gendered achievement. The third one is gender and subcultures. And the fourth one is teacher expectations and gendered classroom behavior. In our lesson today, I'd like to teach this particular topic, that the first one over here, that is gender, socialization, and education attainment. In other words, to what extent does socialization, being specific, gender socialization, affect the educational attainment of pupils? Now, to begin with, I would like to quickly show you the questions that we've had on this particular topic in the last 3 years. So from March 2021 to March 2024, these are the amount of questions, these are the type of questions that we've had on this particular topic. And it is, I think, very evident that this is not the topic that you would want to uh, risk on, or this isn't the topic that you would not want to prepare for. So these are a list of the questions that we've had. Without any further ado, let's begin. So the topic over here, or the name of the topic over here, is gender, socialization, and educational attainment. Like I said, the effect your socialization process has on the educational attainment of an individual. Now, to begin with, it is pretty important that we understand that it was very common till the 1970s and the 1980s that people would speak about how females were underachieving. However, with the passage of time, especially when you talk about UK, this female underachievement, or this underachievement by girls, this changed. And today, with the passage of time, we see that girls, if anything, they are outperforming boys. So girls we see today are outperforming boys at every level of education. Now, it is very important that we understand this here. However, let's take this a little back and talk about the factors as to why girls were underachieving. Why girls were underachieving. Now, to begin with, the first thing that I'd like bringing in under discussion over here is early gender socialization. Socialization, as we all know, is a learning process that changes human beings into social beings. Socialization can broadly again be put into two main categories. Number one, primary socialization, and the second one that we know of is secondary socialization. Now, as we speak about primary socialization initially starts off with our family, through our family. Now, when we talk about gender socialization, this gender socialization, I believe, starts right after you're born. If you may recall, you might have come across a newborn child, and if the boy is a male child, the boy would be, oh, I'm sorry, if the child is a male child, the child would be wrapped in blue. And you must have seen you must have seen little girls being wrapped into green. So the point that I'm trying to make over here is that this gender socialization that we're referring to, this starts very early. Now, as we speak about early gender socialization over here, we're talking about the preschool time. Even before a child starts school, there's this gender socialization process that starts, which consequently affects the educational experiences of individuals. There was a study that was conducted by Fiona Norman. Norman conducted a research in 1988, and according to Fiona Norman, gender socialization starts at home. The keyword over here is home, before even children start going to school. According to Fiona Norman, parents try conditioning, or if I may use the reference of Anne Oakley, the popular feminist Anne Oakley, when she came up with her concept of canalization and manipulation. You might as well Google this: canalization and manipulation. Now, canalization and manipulation had to do with how parents deliberately try to channel the interests of a particular child according to the gendered expectations that there are from the child, according to the society that the child is a part of. Likewise, when you talk about manipulation, manipulation refers to the extent to which parents are seen to be manipulating their children into gender specific or gender preferred activities. Now, taking this ahead, as we speak about Fiona Norman, as we speak about the study that was conducted by Fiona Norman, according to Norman, children at a very young age are conditioned. Children at a very young age are conditioned. They're conditioned through sex stereotypical toys as well. I'm sure you would agree if I talk about how are girls get dolls as toys to play with, and boys, they get in many cases wheeled toys to play with. Now when we talk about girls getting dolls to play with, that might be a reason as to why girls grow up to be showing their inclination towards caring professions. Now, taking this ahead, this stereotyping is further reinforced through the media as well. That is an example of secondary socialization. So the point we're trying to make over here is, it isn't only and always the school, it isn't only and always the education system that should be blamed for the differences in terms of education attainment. So Norman over here claims it is your family, and this starts at home. This starts way before a child starts going to school. The keywords over here are conditioning and sex stereotypical toys. This could be used as an example over here. Taking this ahead, if I move on, we could refer to this study that was conducted by Tina Rampino. Now, pretty much in line with what Fiona Norman had said. And if we have a look at this, if we try to make a comparison over here, Fiona Norman came up with this idea in 1988. Tina Rampino came up with this idea in 2015. So good about, if I say good about 20 25 plus years, with a difference of 20-25 plus years, it was seen that the differences in terms of how children are socialized according to the sex they belong to, according to their gender, they still persist. Now, this research that was conducted by Rampino in the year 2015, she claimed that boys are encouraged to play with toys that help with development of spatial skills, which consequently leads to them being better at mathematics. Now, again, this is pretty much in line with the study that was conducted by Fiona Norman. We're talking about how children are given or presented, or uh, they're made to build interests. Now, parents, they try their best to build their children's interest according to the gendered expectations. Now, according to Rampino, the toys that kids get over here, she gives examples of how boys get toys that help them develop their spatial skills, which consequently leads to them being better with mathematics. So we spoke about two key thinkers over here. Number one, we spoke about Fiona Norman. Number two, we spoke about Tina Rampino. Taking this ahead, if I may give you another example over here, there was a study that was conducted by Sue Sharp. Now, Sue Sharp, about her research, she conducted a research in the 1970s, and then she conducted a research again in the 1990s. So being specific, the study that Sharp conducted in 1976, she collected a data from working class girls in from different schools in London. And what she found out was that when these girls, they were asked about their priorities or about their preferences, the priorities or the preferences were pretty much in this order. For them, love was important. For them, marriage was important. For them, husband was important. Having children was important. And then came jobs and careers. So, of course, if you're talking about an individual who shows preference towards love, marriage, husband, and children, and then or then further down in the list might consider jobs or their careers important. Of course, this is going to reflect in differences in education attainment. You would want to study, or many girls are seen today being better in terms of education because they have inspirations ahead, because they're looking forward towards being economically independent. So the study that was conducted by Sue Sharp in the year 1976, she claims that the priorities that girls had back in the 1970s could be a major reason behind them not doing well. However, when she conducted a research again in 1990s, that is 1994, what she figured out was that these priorities now had changed. And according to Sue Sharp, girls now showed preferences towards their careers, which might explain the educational attainment of girls being better than boys. Now, again, this is the point that I was trying to make a couple of minutes ago. According to Sue Sharp, This shift in terms of priorities, this shift in terms of preferences might be a reason as to why girls today have started outperforming boys. So the crux of this entire thing is, as long as you're not prioritizing your profession, as long as you're not prioritizing your career, as long as you're not prioritizing wanting to be economically independent, you might not end up doing well in your education. You might not be able to get a very good grade. So for you to do well in education, you need to set things straight first. You need to prioritize your jobs, you need to prioritize your careers. Now, we've spoken about three key thinkers over here. Number one, we started off here on Norman. Number two, we spoke about Rampino. Number three, we spoke about Sue Sharp. Taking this a little further, I would like to discuss a contemporary issue that I really like. I mean, I like this organization, this name of this organization. There's this organization that we're talking about, that we would talk about. It's a UK based organization, and the name of this organization is Let Toys Be Toys. Get the hint here. Let Toys Be Toys. Now, what do we mean when we say let toys be toys? Now, this particular organization that we're talking about, like I said, this is a UK based organization, and this particular organization is trying to stop toy manufacturers and toy retailers from categorizing different toys for boys and girls. Now, if I may give you an example over here, if you walk into any toy store, if you're walking into any toy store to, let's just say, get a toy for someone you know, and there are many chances that you might come across different categories or different boards that have been displayed over here that would say maybe boys toys, toys for boys, and there would be different categories of toys that would be for there that would be there for girls. So the point I'm making over here is, as long as these differences, or as long as these stereotypical differences do not extinct, or as long as we do not get rid of these stereotypical gendered expectations or these stereotypical toy preferences, it might not be easy for children to uh, to 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 uh, to not fall into the trap of, let's just say, particular subject choices. Of course, see, this goes a long way. It's more like a chain. Now, if I may put it in this manner, the toys that you show preference towards might lead to you developing interest towards something, and the amount of interest you start developing towards something might lead to different subjects that you choose to study. So this could eventually impact your subject choice. Your subject choice might eventually impact the career options you have. And the career options you have decide your pay, your status, your power, your prestige, and the list goes on. So it wouldn't be wrong if we say things need to be identified. I mean, the root cause needs to be identified, and it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed right away. So we're talking about this contemporary issue. We're talking about this UK based organization with the name Let Toys Be Toys. What I had said was, this particular organization was trying to stop toy manufacturers and retailers from categorizing different toys for boys and girls. So again, this particular organization, or the content that we're discussing over here, could be linked to this, that is Fiona Norman and Tina Rampino both. Now, taking this ahead, moving on. So there was a survey that was conducted by this organization in 2012, and the findings from the survey showed that around 50% of shops that they collected data from, they used signs such as boys toys and girls toys. Now, 50% of the shops, that's a huge number, that's a big number, right? However, when they conducted the research again, when they started collecting data again in 2016, they saw now that things had changed, and the signs that they had initially seen at different toy stores, they had started to disappear. But the question is, does this fix everything? No, it does not. Because guess what? However, the packaging, the catalog, the catalog, as well as advertisements, was still seen to be very stereotypical. So what we're talking about over here is a change in terms of the how the toy stores or how toy retailers, they had probably removed the signs, but this didn't really fix everything, or this, let's just say, didn't really fix everything the way it should have been fixed. Because even now, different there were different ways through which this stereotypical gendered segregation, it kept on taking place, in terms of the way these toys were packaged, in terms of the catalogs that were printed by these toy manufacturers, and through the way they would advertise their toys or advertise their products. So this again, this could be this contemporary issue could be used as sociological material too while you're writing your answer. So taking this ahead, we so far have spoken about Fiona Norman, number one. Number two, we spoke about Tina Rampino. Number three, we spoke about Sue Sharp. Number four, we spoke about this UK based organization with the name Let Toys Be Toys. However, it isn't just the family background, or it isn't just the early socialization process that we need to blame over here. There's more to it too. The gender based socialization that starts off, like I said, right after you born, this is reinforced by the education system as well. Yes, now we're shifting the blame towards the education system as well, or the role that this education system plays in terms of segregating different subjects, or segregating, or rather say reinforcing the gender role socialization that had started off really early. So moving on, there was a study that was conducted by Glenn Sloban in the year 1974. Now, this study that was conducted by Loban in 1974 had to do with reading schemes, or in other words, the books that young kids get at school in the very initial, with the very early years to read. Now, what Loban found out, that these books or these reading schemes that were used in Britain, they had gender biasness. So we're talking about how these different reading schemes that are used in Britain, that were used in Britain back in the 1970s at least, were biased in terms of gender. What Loban found out was that from the sample she studied, out of 179 stories through six reading schemes, 71 of them had male heroes, whereas 35 of them had female heroes. Now, you and I both know that demographically we have more of females in any given society as compared to males. And this difference over here, where males are shown to be superior in the sense that the heroic, whatever the act is, or whatever the story is, like if different stories make it appear to be like that it is a male who ends up playing the role of a savior, who ends up uh helping you when required, who ends up being a provider. This doesn't really leave a very favorable impression on young females. I mean, in other words, in a very subtle manner, you're telling them that tomorrow, as they grow older, they should be okay being dependent on anyone else. I'm sorry. So, yeah, girls were almost always portrayed. Now, number one, the amount of times you're presenting someone. Number two, the way you're presenting them. Girls were almost always portrayed exclusively in traditional domestic roles. So, if through these stories, young girls, they made to believe that their role tomorrow as they grow older is more or less revolving around their traditions, or is more or less revolving around traditional domestic roles. What sort of impression do you think it is going to leave on them, or what sort of inspirations do you think they'd be carrying as they grow older? Now, moving on, we just spoke about Loban and the research that was conducted by Loban in the year 1974. Now, this isn't only true in Britain, or we cannot even say that this is perhaps a thing of the past today, because we have another sociological reference over here. We have another study that was conducted by Clark, and this research that was conducted by Clark was conducted in it was conducted in 2016. So this study that was conducted by Clark in 2016 was on Japanese English language textbooks. Now we're talking about Japanese. Over here we had spoken about Britain. Now we're talking about Japanese. So the study that was conducted by Clark in 2016 on Japanese English language textbooks. What Clark found out was that males and females had equal representation. Oh, that's a good thing. Having equal representation, like I said earlier, representing, overrepresenting, and underrepresenting a particular gender is one thing. That's one domain. But another domain that we also need to tap into is the way they're representing them. Now, according to Clark, in the research that was conducted in 2016, based on data from Japanese English language textbooks, Clark found out that male and females had now equal representation. However, the biasness was still evident. This biasness was still evident in the representation of gender roles, the way these different the way gender roles were defined, the way these different gender roles were prescribed. There was still biasness to be found in them. So we're down with Loban, we're down with Clark. Taking this a little further, let's talk about another study that was conducted by Islam et al., Islam and his colleagues. Now, when I use the word Islam over here, I'm actually referring to Qazi M.M. Islam and Muhammad Niaz Asadullah. So this study that was conducted by Qazi M.M. Islam and Muhammad Niaz Asadullah. So this study that was conducted by Islam et al. In the year 2018, and when I say 2018, this is again relatively very recent. Now, this study was actually a comparative study. This was a comparative study from different school textbooks that were used in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Pakistan, and Bangladesh. I repeat, I'm talking about a comparative study that was conducted by Islam et al. In the year 2018. And through this comparative study, we would discuss how there was gender stereotype found in textbooks that were used in different secondary schools in countries such as Malaysia, in countries such as Indonesia, in countries such as Pakistan, and in countries such as Bangladesh. Now, taking this ahead, Islam et al. Found that girls were much more likely to be represented in domestic roles. So again, this trend continues. Bear this thing in mind. Let's keep a check on. Let's remind ourselves of what we're studying. We're discussing the study that was conducted by Islam et al. Under the heading of gender socialization in schools, under the heading of gender socialization within schools, right? So again, this study that was conducted by Islam, like I was saying, found out that females were even to this stage. So see, 2018 is relatively very recent. So females were much more likely to be represented in domestic roles. However, we are talking about a comparative study between the textbooks that were used in 4 different countries, in secondary schools in 4 different countries. Amongst these countries, there were differences too. And what Islam et al. Found out was that countries such as Pakistan and Bangladesh, the textbooks that were used in these countries, they reflected the most amount of discrimination. So amongst these 4, that is Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia, it was seen that this gender-based discrimination went to another level when it came to countries such as Pakistan and Bangladesh. And let's just say Malaysia and Indonesia were relatively a little better. Moving on, we have another key thinker over here, the study that was conducted by Lee and Collins. Now, this study that was conducted by Lee and Collins was conducted in the year 2010. And over here, we would discuss how in Australia, we talk about Australia over here, how in Australia, only 42.5% of characters that were used in textbooks were females. Only 42.5% of the characters that were used in the textbooks were females. Men and women were represented in traditional gender stereotypes in terms of their occupation and domestic roles both. So we're talking about 2 different dimensions over here. Number 1, domestic roles. Number 2, occupation. Yes, they go hand in hand. Yes, they are linked to each other, but nonetheless, it is important that we understand that the study that was conducted by Lee and Collins in the year 2010, that was based on Australian textbooks. What Lee and Collins found out was that only 45.5% of the characters that were used in those textbooks were females. What Lee and Collins also found out was that both men and women, they were represented in traditional gender stereotypes in terms of their occupation as well as their domestic roles. Taking this a little further, moving on, if we take this a little further and we talk about the criticism of socialization theory. Now, why is it that I would say the criticism of socialization theory? Because remember, we initially were discussing the extent to which the extent to which your socialization plays an important role in terms of affecting the education attainment. Now, as we move on and try scrutinizing this entire idea, don't you think this socialization process, or the impact this socialization, the impact that this gender role socialization could have on the educational performance of girls and boys both, where girls so far, where girls, as it appeared to be, like from the references that we used, were being discouraged, were being deliberately, intentionally made to take interest in caring professions and not otherwise. So if we talk about the criticism of the socialization theory, number one, it lays a bit too much of an emphasis on the role of socialization. Fine, socialization is important, but is it that important is a question. Now, this entire idea of socialization playing its role in terms of determining or affecting, if I go a little softer here, affecting the education attainment of pupils looks like it is a very deterministic theory. Deterministic, or in other words, comes from the word determinism, based on the idea that this is something that is bound to happen. And when you say this is something that is bound to happen, you're automatically neglecting the role human agency could play. You're automatically neglecting the role human agency could play, because guess what? There are people who resist gendered expectations. There are people who might not want to give in to the gendered expectations the society has from them. Now, different arenas that we've tapped into, we initially spoke about your the role your primary socialization could play in terms of your in terms of your education attainment. We had initially spoken about the study that was conducted by Fiona Norman, followed by the study that was conducted by Tina Rampino, followed by the study that was conducted by Sue Sharp early in 1976 and later in 1994. Moving on, we had spoken about a couple of more references over here too. Then we moved on and we spoke about this what do you call it? This UK based organization with the name Let Toys Be Toys. We went on and then we spoke about the role that your schools could play, that the schools do play, where we discussed the study that was conducted by Loban and the study that was conducted by Clark, followed by the study that was conducted by Islam et al., followed by the study that was conducted by Lee and Collins, followed by the criticism of the socialization theory. Now, if I may take this a little further, and we speak about gender, subject choice, and socialization. Yes, we're talking about how male students, as compared to female students, show preference towards different subjects. I mean, there's a possibility that they're showing preference towards one subject and not other, probably because they've been socialized to do so, probably because they've been conditioned to do so, probably they've been made to believe that that's the right choice for them. And of course, the subjects you choose today determine the career choices, determine the professions you join ahead, and the profession you join ahead determines the life you live, determines the extent to which you could actually be economically independent, determines the extent to which you would have power, privilege, prestige, and desired socioeconomic status. So moving on, if I talk about the relationship between gender, subject choice, and socialization, Different subject studies studied by boys and girls might disadvantage women in the labor market in terms of job status and pay. That's exactly what I'd said a couple of minutes ago. So this study that was conducted by Charles et al., that is Maria Charles et al. In 2014, that is good 10 years ago. Through this research, we found out that the representation of females in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields vary, and this varies over time with places as well. One. Number two, mathematics and technical degrees. Mathematics and technical degree programs are less male dominated in poor societies. Now, this is something that is worthy noting over here. This is something that is pretty contrary to what we believe in, and this is pretty different from what we usually expect of. When we talk about, or as we talk about STEM subjects here. Now, STEM, when we talk about STEM subjects, you all would be aware that STEM over here refers to science. This is the STEM I'm talking about. STEM refers to, I just might as well just write it down. So STEM over here refers to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's a bit too crumpy, but that's the space I have. So yeah, according to the study that was conducted by Charles et al. In 2014, what Charles et al. Found out, Charles et al., that means Charles and others, that is Maria Charles, and she was not alone. She had other colleagues with her too. So what she finds out was that the representation of females in STEM fields, it varies. It varies with time across societies both. And another thing that I was saying is worthy noting down over here is that the amount of interest or the numbers or the extent to which mathematics and technical degree programs are chosen by males and females, it varies, it differs. And it was seen that the poorer a society is, I might as well just, I think I need some space to write this down. So the poorer the society is, the lesser the gap between subject choice turns out to be. Now, let me help you understand this through an example. So, Charles picked up cross national data and found out that if you talk about a comparison between males and females in terms of the mathematics related jobs they seek or they pursue, 1%, the difference over here, the gap over here was 1% between males and females in countries such as South Africa and Ghana. In less developed countries, in relatively poor countries such as South Africa and Ghana, the difference between males and females, the gender gap, the word I'm using over here is gender gap, the difference between males and females in terms of the jobs, the mathematics related jobs they seek was only 1%. However, on the other hand, if you talk about the more developed parts of the world and countries such as, let's just say, Netherlands, this difference went up all the way till 23%. And that's quite a difference over here. So I hope this was understood. Let's move on, talk about another contemporary study, and then we'd wrap this up. So this contemporary study has its data from the organization for educational sorry the organization from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that is also referred to as OECD. That is also referred to as OECD. What does OECD stand for? The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. What does OECD again stand for? The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So what does OECD for the third time stand for? It stands for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So through the statistics that were found from the OECD, it was seen that when we talk about higher education, if we talk about the amount of degrees, the amount of bachelor degrees, let's just say in 2013, there were 6 million. And guess what? Out of these 6 million bachelor degrees that were allotted, uh, that students received, 58% of them were females and 42% of them were males. Now, this is something that many of us do not really expect. Likewise, if we talk about differences in terms of the field of study, or if we talk about subject choice over here, it was seen that 64% of the degrees that were pursued by females, 64% of the degrees that were pursued by females were were from social sciences and humanity. However, only 31% of the girls, they pursued engineering and sciences. So we're talking about females. I know if you were able to make a connection over here, this is what we're talking about. I just mark it over here so that it's easier to understand. This is what we're talking about here and here. Now, if we talk about the field of the study, 64% of females opted for or they chose social sciences and humanity, and only 31% of females opted for engineering and sciences. So, again, this is quite a difference over here, which is a projection of how there are different expectations of females, or there are different expectations from females as compared to males. Now, let me reiterate, let me remind you again for the last time in this lesson, the career expectations you have leads to the career choice you make. The career choice you make leads to the gap in terms of your gender. Or in other words, if you are a male or a female, the subjects you choose today would probably be according to the career expectations you have. The career expectations you have would eventually help you make career choices, which consequently affects your pay, your socioeconomic status, your life chances, your power, prestige, privileges, so on and so forth. Now, this is where this topic, gender, socialization, and education, comes to an end. Let me repeat, this is just the first subtopic, and there are three more to go. I hope this was helpful. Thank you.